My name's Thomas Barlow. I am Senior Editor and Co-Founder of Real Media, and today we're going to be talking about the future of new media. So let me introduce our speakers. First up, we'll have Kerry-Anne Mendoza from the now, according to the Daily Mail, pretty infamous Canary. And according to certain members of Save Labour, the reason why Jeremy Corbyn won, they've decided they need to get a canary for the right wing of Labour, so we'll see how that pans out. We'll see what the readership is for that. Kerry-Anne is also the author of Austerity, the Demolition of the Welfare State and the Rise of the Zombie Economy. And myself and Cam came across her when she was blogging under the name Scriptonite, which is a fantastic blog, and if you can go back and check it out, it's really worth a read. There's a lot of stuff that's really relevant to today, but especially the book. Check it out, Austerity, the Demolition of the Welfare State and the Rise of the Zombie Economy. Next we've got Craig McVegas, who's co-founder of Novara Media and editor-in-chief of Articles, formerly of Novara Wire, and again, I think hopefully most people are familiar with Novara Media's work, but they've had quite significant impact on both discussions in Labour, but also around a lot of European and global politics and homegrown politics that often isn't discussed in a very broad sense. So hopefully you know Novara. Then next up we've got Dean Ayotte, who's coordinator and journalist at the Bristol Cable, and hopefully everyone here is familiar with the Bristol Cable. It's a fantastic publication, and one of the major problems with Bristol is that you do things so well here, you never bother to tell the rest of the country about how you did them. You don't need to leave. It's a wonderful place, so we're looking forward to hear that, because I think for the videos, there's lots of people around the country who are looking at the Bristol Cable and saying, is this the way we can do local news in our area? So it'll be great to hear from him. I will also actually be speaking in a rare departure from my usual MCing role, just to chat about Real Media very briefly. And then we have Elizabeth Mizon, who's an organiser for Radical Film Network, also a contributor to the Cable, also a former contributor to Canary, and many, many other alternative media projects. And we'll be talking about the Media Fund, which I think will be very timely. I'd like to also mention that apologies from Samantha Asamadu from Media Diversified. She can't make it due to some personal problems, which is quite sad, but please do check out Media Diversified's work. It is absolutely cutting edge, so important right now. When we talk about diversity, we're talking about gender, sexuality, race and class, with Media Diversified ahead of everyone in covering this. Just look at the roster of people they've got working for them. It's fantastic. So I really can't recommend it enough. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kerry-Anne, and then we'll just go down the list. I hope you enjoy this, and please give a warm round of applause for Kerry-Anne Mendoza. Thanks.
Hello. Oh, it's brilliant to be here tonight, especially getting to speak in my hometown. As you can tell from my accent, I am a Bristol girl. I grew up in Kingswood, just down the road, which is a glorious place, as many of you will know. So it's actually the Canary's first birthday this week. We've just celebrated 1 year of being in existence, and goodness gracious, what an extraordinary year it's been. The Canary, I don't know if many of you will know this, the Canary actually started as a conversation at a party. I'd been writing at Scriptonite Daily for about 5 years, four or 5 years by that point, and bemoaning the state of the UK media and why can't we do something? And then a close friend of mine said, well, why don't we? What if you took sort of Scriptonite to the logical next level and created a whole outlet? And that was in 2014. And a year of conversations and planning and recruiting and building later, we launched the Canary in October of 2015. And, we planned a quiet year. We thought we'd go out, we started with nothing. This is the thing most people don't actually know about the Canary. We set up for significantly less than £1,000. We had no external investment, no external shareholders, no government grant, no philanthropist who kindly gave us millions of pounds to set up the outlet. We started with absolutely nothing, and we've earned every penny, every follower. We've now got over 2,000 paying subscribers who are actually paying for something they can get entirely for free. They don't get a mug, they don't get a T-shirt, just to be a part of building the new media. And I just thank each and every one of them. I think it's extraordinary that people are helping us build this new media. So what does that year look like? Well, about, I think it was about, we'd only been running about 2 months, and there was a whole page in the Telegraph saying, "The Canary is the maddest left-wing website in the world." And we were kind of like, if we're anything in the world at 2 months, we'll just take it. That was fantastic. And it's only gone up. And, you know, by the time we got to our first birthday, we'd managed to reach 14 million people. And that's 40 million hits on the website. If we weren't to grow at all in the next year, we'd be a £250,000 a year business as it stands, which means that we're now in the position, and we have been throughout the year, of paying writers a decent wage for their work. And actually developing the business model for the Canary was actually one of the most challenging things that we came up with, because what we wanted to do was essentially create a revenue share model. One of the things that really frustrates me most about the mainstream media and new media, actually, is you're expected to do it for the love of it. And while that's great that we're passionate and people are willing to give their time and their energy for free, you know, a lot of what we're railing against in the new media is unwaged labour. You know, it's workfare, it's, you know, poor terms and conditions. So we didn't want to replicate that. So what we wanted to do was make sure that the writers and the editors actually share in the growth of the business, and that's why we created a business model which is based on a revenue share. But because of the number of people that are now subscribing to the Canary, it means that we can also offer a flat fee per article, which is really important to us, so nobody's working for free at all. They know that at the very least they're going to get their minimum fee per article, and then they can earn more based on the other avenues of income that we've got. And the other question that we wanted to answer was, how do you fund long-form investigative journalism inside that model? How does that work? So what we did for the whole first year, and what we'll do ongoingly, is actually holding back 5% of everything that we earn and creating a pot called the Investigative Journalism Fund, which our writers can then bid to. So they put in a pitch and say, I want to do this, that, or the other. And we're now in the position on the 27th that we're actually going to have our first writer benefit from that fund. We've got a writer in our global section called Brad Hoff, who's heading to Syria to actually produce stories on the ground from Syria, video, written articles, completely original journalism, completely funded ourselves without seeking any external investment. I'm hugely proud of that. And good luck, Brad. That's not an easy gig. So Brad's off. And we now just launched Canary Media 2.0, which is moving closer to the vehicle that we want to be ongoing, which is a regular news programme. So if you're a fan of the Young Turks, think of a British version of the Young Turks, a really irreverent regular news programme that kind of breaks down the key stories of the week or the month into a news programme for people to digest, and also create an incredible new platform for video bloggers, because we have so many incredible video bloggers in this country, and having a place where people can see them frequently is really, we can shine a light, use our audience, our big audience, to benefit those people is great. But people often say, well, what are you most proud of? And, you know, we're really proud of the reach that we've had. We're really proud that we've got a business model that is sustainable. That's all lovely. But actually, the thing I've been most proud of in this year is the team that we've built. I've never worked anywhere in my life. I've worked in the private sector, the public sector, you know, in blogging and other fields, and I've never been in a workplace that felt so much like home, that had people really working together as a tight unit, that really stand for each other, that pull together. We have a virtual online newsroom rather than an office, but people can still see each other and work together. And the way that the writers actually kind of collaborate with each other on stories is absolutely extraordinary. There's none of this kind of me, you know, hogging of the stories. If a story's pitched by a writer and someone else has been working behind the scenes on something, they'll hand over their research, you know, and say, please take this, I just want your story to be better. And that's been really great. And I think what I'd probably close with is one of the metrics for success that we had when we launched the Canary was that we don't want to be a new media version of the Murdoch empire. We're not empire building. We're proving a concept. We're proving that anyone can do this. And often, you know, when you get to the sort of prominence that we are now, it's, you know, people, as they should, will point out what we're doing wrong and, you know, well, if I was in your position, I'd be doing this or that. And my answer to them is really, really simple. Do it. Like, don't, if you think you can do this better, please do it. Because what we need in our media is to rapidly expand it, to have a diversity of voices, to have a diversity of editorial opinion and line. And that was why one of our metrics of success was actually if in 2 or 3 years' time, not only is the Canary itself thriving, but we've generated 50 other Canaries, that other groups of bloggers, other groups of independent journalists, video bloggers are getting together and going, hang on a minute, they did this with nothing. They did this without a penny of investment. We can do this too. And that way, instead of, you know, the situation we've been in for so long, which is looking at the failure of traditional media in terms of the narrowness of the topics covered, what they miss, what they misreport, and complaining, we're now in a position where we can proactively do something about it. And I think that's absolutely thrilling. I'm so proud and feel really privileged and honoured to be a part of that. And certainly I'm really, really excited about the next year and being able to launch these new channels in video and audio and expand and reach ever more people. So I'm not going to take up any more time on this section and allow the other speakers to speak. I think the only thing I would close on is saying that I don't view these people here as competitors. I see them as teammates in building a new media. And one of the things that I find so refreshing about this new media space is that we're willing to promote each other's work, have each other's back, celebrate each other's successes as if they were our own. And, you know, and again, Sam isn't here, but really, Media Diversified are doing absolutely extraordinary work. They're one of my favourite outlets. So unfortunately, Sam can't be here tonight to bang the drum for Outlet, so I'm going to do it on her behalf. If you haven't checked it out already, absolutely do, because they're awesome. And ditto these guys and girls. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Craig, I'm a senior editor for articles at Bristol Real Media. I'm kind of a backroom guy, I'm not really used to the public facing sort of thing. So I've got notes because I'm not a blooming TV personality like Kerry-Anne. So I was asked to speak a little bit about the state of new media and also to reflect on my own experience with Navarra as well. I think I'll probably take it in 3 sections. So thinking about the state of new media as such, thinking about the state of new media from the inside, if you like, from sort of my experiences in Navarra, and thinking of the state of new media in terms of the future of new media, which maybe we'll get onto in the Q&A as well. One thing I think is undeniable about the state of new media as it currently exists is that it's really increasing in popularity and increasing in acceptance. I think there are 2 things to note on this. One is that the ways in which we're consuming news and commentary are changing. Partly that's because of social media platforms. It's also because of smartphones, the mediums through which we actually get access to our news media. And what that means is that increasingly people, especially young people, I'm teaching media at the moment, and my students are very open-minded when it comes to their media outlets and their media sources. And that's partly because of the ways that they're accessing news. And that's really great and encouraging for a blossoming independent media ecology. The second thing, which also sort of has the internet to note, is that the experience of newspapers who are publishing online, and even the experience of some of the bigger new media players such as Vice, demonstrates that no one's really got an answer to the issue of funding new media. Something like Vice came along, companies like Disney and Warner Brothers threw an awful lot of money, and now they're withdrawing that money and jobs are being lost because it's not profitable. Similarly, the Daily Mirror axed a lot of its staff from its online operation as well recently. And this is a sort of an ongoing problem, I think, for new media outlets who are operating primarily on the internet. people, myself included, are not really accustomed to paying for things we might previously have paid for. And obviously, when there are a wealth of media outlets to choose from, then we can always sort of, go somewhere else. In terms of my experience with Novara Media, so Novara Media was founded in late 2013. It was building on a radio show broadcast on Resonance 104.4 FM. And that radio show kind of came out of the student movement. And it came at a point where the activity within the student movement of 2010, 2011 had sort of subsided, but the conversations were really just getting started and just getting interesting. So the radio show was a sort of way to try and crystallize some of those conversations and institutionalize them so that, a movement could keep having them despite the sort of the activity falling away, which is often a problem with student movements. Novara has always had a dual purpose, really. So on one hand, we try and think of it as a means by which social movements can speak to themselves and to each other, and to reflect and generate ideas. But we also try to think of it as a way for people to access radical ideas, people who perhaps wouldn't normally come across them. And those two purposes aren't always harmonious with one another either. That's sometimes a bit of a difficult path to navigate, because what might be really useful to one constituency within your audience might really piss off another part. When Novara Media started, as opposed to just a sort of Novara FM podcast, we launched two things. One was an article section called Novara Wire, which I was the editor of, and the other was we started doing videos, which now has a range of channels and interviews and the rest of it. So building from our core audience, we try to sort of develop a plurality of content, and even within the editorial team, we all think different things. We're all sort of bringing different ideas and different politics and different takes on political situations to the equation. In terms of how we got that up and running, the first thing was that we decided to schedule, and then we stuck to it. And that can't really be underestimated. It's the number one tip that I'd give to anyone who was thinking about starting a new media outlet. So in the case of the articles at Novara, it was that there would be 3 articles a week, every week. And if a contributor lets you down, then you're going to stay up and write an article and publish it the next day, because we're always going to hit 3 articles a week. Another was attention to detail in terms of our aesthetics and trying to make sure that we had things like a style guide, and that regardless of the content on the website was sort of instantly recognizable for its aesthetics, which is often such a big gatekeeper when everything is free online. If everything's free, then there's a good chance that people are going to stick with something that looks good as well as has interesting content. Sorry, I've got very poorly lungs at the minute, so I'm a bit out of breath. Another big thing was that we thought about the audience and how they're accessing the site. So our articles are generally short form, and sometimes people will submit articles to us, and they would be, 3,000 words long, and we say, we just can't use this. And they say, well, why not? It's all good. And we say, well, War and Peace is all good, but no one's going to read it on a smartphone. We do now have a long read section on the site, but in the early days we were very mindful of the fact that most of our audience was accessing Novara through smartphones. So we try and think about the way that people are using things and how we can connect the ideas we want to get to people with the ways they're actually accessing media. And then lastly, we saw the operation in quite a holistic way in terms of levels of engagement. So, reading a short article or watching a short video is not a very big investment of time. And the idea is that once people have done that a few times, then maybe they'll give a chance to listen to a radio show, which is an hour long and much more in depth than the rest of it. But above all, getting things off the ground just took lots of hard, unglamorous and unpaid work. We had a fundraiser last year, which we were only able to do by virtue of the fact that, our many contributors up until that point had contributed their articles for free, which is not ideal, but we had no money to start up with at all. Our first priority was paying our authors and expenses for people who couldn't otherwise appear on the radio or appear on the video program. But still, the core editorial team, none of us are paid. And that's an issue because, it's not just a case of an article comes in, you copy and paste it. You've got an article being pitched, you give feedback, you get a submission, you maybe do some tweaks, you copy edit it, you fact check, you just check it with a style guide, find the image, do the publicity, and you do that 3 times a week, and now actually we've raised it to 7 times a week. I'm finishing. While we are currently in a position of being able to pay a very sort of modest, we don't even call it a rate, it's just a gratuity fee, really. It's a token of our gratitude to writers and contributors. It's just not sustainable. And, we did some sums recently, and to think about if we were just to keep if we were to increase our sort of gratuity fees for writers slightly, so they're about half of market rate, and if we were to pay all of the core team somewhere ranging from a 20 hours a week to a 5 hours a week living wage, so no one even full-time, plus a cheap studio, that would cost us £140,000 a year. And to fundraise that sort of money is a really big problem. I don't think anyone's got the answer to it. And obviously, given the fact that beyond trying to sustain, we are ultimately trying to play a role in, winning a new world. When we look at the other side and how much money they've got, it's going to take millions. And I think that'll probably require us all, embracing new media and deciding that it's worth giving money to. Thanks.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dean. I'm from the Bristol Cable. Hopefully that's something that most of you have heard of already, but I'm just going to give you sort of a little bit of a potted history about who we are and what we do, and then talk a little bit about sort of our structure and the future of us as an organisation. So a little bit like Kerry, the Cable was started in a pub with some people chatting over an idea about how local journalism in particular is basically a byword for rubbish, for the most part. And it was, how do we solve the problem that sort of Craig has just outlined? How do you fund a media organisation without resorting to just half of it being full of adverts, without half of it being full of advertorial, which is like, an advert disguised as an article? How do you do articles that aren't just copy-pasting press releases and churning them out? And most importantly for us is, how can you have some kind of presence in print? Because everyone knows, obviously, like day-to-day print newspapers are just, flatlining. But we think as an organisation that print in some kind of capacity is really important, and we found that giving out copies of our paper in the street has given us a really pretty diverse base of readers. Like, our membership isn't so diverse, but our readership is. So the Cable started with a Kickstarter which raised about £3,000, and people went round Bristol and spoke to people in the street. They spoke to academics, journalists, lawyers, just people on the side of the road, and asked them what it was they thought was important about local media. And based on that, a series of free media training workshops were put on using the money raised from the Kickstarter, which basically, I think there's about a dozen free media workshops. And then the people that came to those media workshops and were interested became the first members of the co-op. And we also got about 1,500 quid from Co-ops UK, which is, they gave us some start-up money, essentially, so we could register as a co-op and do all the legal side of it. The reason we decided to go for being a co-op as an organisation is because, as well as it being a subscriber, who's going to give you some regular money, it's also, we felt it's really important to have democratic control over certain things in an organisation. So one of our directors, a guy called Mike Jempson, who's an NUJ rep, basically told us, when you're doing journalism, if you want to find something dodgy out about an organisation, follow the money. So we kind of used that principle to kind of have our own organisation, and we really wanted that side of our organisation in particular to be really, really open. So when, for example, like at our AGMs every year, we do participatory budgeting where our members can basically allocate how we spend our money over the year and decide what we do. So, and most of our money day to day comes from our membership now. So as of this morning, we've got 1,370 co-op members. And we do have a little bit of advertising in our print edition. This is something that makes us a little bit different from sort of organisations, from other new media organisations. We do take some advertising, but the advertising we take is kind of, again, this is a democratic thing that our members control, where the charter that tells us what we're allowed to put in and as an advert was decided by our members and voted on at the AGM. So we think that it's an unfortunate compromise that we're kind of making at the moment, but we feel like those things do have to happen for us at the moment, but if they do, then we're going to give our members a kind of say over it. So the reason we think that local journalism is so important is because, you know, the media in the UK basically, as most people probably already think and feel, is very London-centric. It's basically, you know, particularly stuff like politics, it's basically, you know, people who are writing about it stay in the Westminster lobby, or maybe they'll go out to, you know, some fancy wine bar and, you know, chat to a politician. But, you know, a lot of people live in core cities across, I think it's like 19 million people live in core cities in the UK. So it's like, we felt like those places, like all of these big cities in the UK, are basically, there's stuff going on there which isn't being picked up in national media. And we felt like the kind of old model of how it used to be, which is, you know, a local newspaper would report on something, if it was big, it would get picked up by the national media, was kind of broken. And we wanted to try and fix that. And the latest edition of the cable, which has just come out and is sitting on some of your chairs, we've had a story in that about police surveillance, which is something that Alon, the guy who wrote the story, you know, broke, and that's been picked up in The Guardian, The Times, and by the BBC. So it's something we felt could really, you know, really give people a way of getting sort of smaller issues in a city which, you know, Bristol is only a city of 460,000 people, so it's not, you know, particularly massive, but there's stuff happening here which we think that reflects sort of more widely in the UK. There's other things that we've done which we think are kind of important for our model. Print has been a big thing for us, and we don't print that regularly. We're only a quarterly because it's just, you know, it is really expensive to print, and the amount of money that we have coming in is, you know, we can't really afford to do it more than that and pay people for their time. But so in our print editions, we always have at least one piece which is dual language. So in the latest edition, we've got a piece which is in English and in Arabic. In the last edition, I think we had a piece which was in English and Bengali, and then in the edition before that, we had a piece which was in English and Somali. And that's sort of really helped us build up an audience in, you know, communities that might not otherwise read us. So we've also done that online. We've also had articles translated into other languages online, and we've done that through sort of developing relationships with. You know, I think one thing that's helped the cable do so well so far is that we've kind of fostered relationships with groups in the city who are kind of doing stuff already. So a lot of our stuff, like contacts in the Somali community and our translations, comes from a guy called Abdi, who sits on our boards of directors, who, you know, has opened up so many doors for us. And we've also got people who do stuff with Ujima, which is a local radio station, and we've kind of really tapped into those resources. I think future of the cable, our short-term, sort of medium-term aim is to reach 2,500 members in the next sort of year or 18 months. And the reason we want to do that is because we're 2,500 members paying about £2.50 or £3 a month. It basically means that we're going to be pretty much self-sustaining, and we won't have to rely on stuff like external grants or, which we do still have to rely on a little bit. Long-term future, and it's something that sort of Kerry mentioned, it's about cooperation with other media sources. So we're involved in this thing called the Journalism Startup Network, which has been started with another cooperatively owned media organisation called the Ferret, which is based in Scotland. And it's basically just a Facebook group at the moment, but that's something where we're sort of sharing ideas about, so we've recently copied something that they do, which is a monthly transparency report, which gets sent to all of our members, and they've recently copied something that we do, which is using an online platform to vote on decisions that the co-op takes. And we also basically want to see cables across, like versions of the cable across every single city in the UK, if not as well as sort of big towns, basically, because we think that it really provides a leg up for people in communities to both be journalists and also hear about really important stuff that they're otherwise not hearing.
Right, okay. Well, hello again. It's me, it's Tom Barlow from Real Media. So I guess I wanted to split up what I was going to say into 3 sections as well. I wanted to talk about, just very quickly, about what the problems are with the media as it currently exists. And I think someone else has done the work better than me, so we'll talk about that. And then talk a little bit about Real Media and what it has done and what it's doing. But then also talk about, I think, the challenges that remain for all of the new media and for the media generally. As a member of the NUJ, I think we should talk about workers' rights and workers' conditions within the media as well. I think that's important. So, in terms of problems with the media, there's a couple of people, you might have heard of them, Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman, who did a book called Manufacturing Consent, and in it they outline a theory that's called the 5 filters theory, that says there's 5 filters between you and the information you get about the world through the media. And those filters are the ownership of the media. We know that 80% of the press is owned by 5 billionaires. We know that 70% of TV and radio news is owned by the state through the BBC. So ownership is important. Funding is important. Advertising is the way that the licence fee is the BBC, but the BBC's licence fee isn't separate from government, so we know that that's a state organisation. And advertisers basically pay for the paper. Papers are sold to advertisers, not to you and me. What we pay for the paper doesn't even pay for the paper that it's printed on, not even close. So multinational advertisers will want their interests represented. I think the most significant example of this recently is the Conservative commentator Peter Oborne, who's the political editor of The Telegraph, leaving The Telegraph because he couldn't report on HSBC because they were doing a serious sponsorship of The Telegraph. I mean, this is a direct impact, but mostly this is something that journalists internalise. They know who their owners are, they know who their advertisers are. You know that before you go and work for the Daily Mail or the Sun or the Guardian even. And then we've got the pressures of what Nick Davies calls churnalism, which is the pressure to release as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and fact check as little as possible, because it takes time. So you fact check. You don't have to fact check things that come from think tanks or from government sources, but you do have to fact check what people like you and me send. So they'll take think tanks all day, and that's why the Institute for Economic Affairs and Migrant Watch and so forth have front pages every single day. In fact, 80% of everything you read in the press is written by PR companies, which, of course, used to be PR, public relations, used to be called propaganda, but in a swift move of propaganda, they changed the name to PR. And then it's a pretty genius move. I think we need some of those guys on our side. Then you also have the mobilisation of fear and patriotism, and you also have the fear that journalists have from being sued, and papers have of being sued, which is a fear of the rich. It's not you and I. You and I, we don't have the resources to sue a paper successfully, but, you know, Max Mosley does, you know, and all of those types. The City of London does. That's why we have Benefit Street, we don't have Bankers Street. As much as anything else is a fear of reprisals. So recognising all of that, actually let me talk about what are the problems for new media. New media faces similar pressures, not from ownership, not from advertising, largely. New media will usually, like ourselves, ban advertising or do it in an ethical possible way. We don't push patriotism usually, though there are obviously new media outlets that do that. The key problem that we have that is both faced in the mainstream press, the mass media, and in the new media is what Nick Davies calls journalism. The need to turn out copy, the need to fact check. It is expensive to fact check. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes skill. We're either going to have quality journalism come from new media, or, as we get currently from the new media, a lot of what we do is commentary. We cannibalise work that has been done by other journalists, by the Press Association and so forth, and we comment on it. We bring you a different spin, we utilise it to tell you a different story. But new media doesn't have the resources to do proper journalism, nor does mainstream journalism. Just today, the BBC announced it's looking to lay off 300 staff in its news department. BuzzFeed is losing money. Daily Mail is losing, its profits are going down. The Sun has been losing so much money for years that if Rupert Murdoch wasn't around, it would have been sold off and maybe even shut down a long time ago. We're all facing the same financial pressures. What Kerry-Anne pointed out that is an opportunity for new media is we're not competing with each other. We may not have multi-billion pound benefactors, but we can work together. We can do what lefties and progressives have always talked about, which is we can cooperate. And I believe that's through having strong unionised workplaces, and I think it's through founding cooperatives and networking those cooperatives. I think that's the way forward for new media to try and meet those pressures. But I think something we've got to do in an age where everything is free is engage with our readership and reach a larger readership, reach beyond the people we usually reach, because we are often preaching to the choir. But not only that, we need to engender a recognition that this is something worth supporting. It's not just worth supporting, it's worth being part of. Funding it shouldn't be just a transactional process of saying, here you go, here's some of my money, I'm giving you some of my labour time. I've spent an hour, earning £8.50, and I'm going to give you half an hour of that each week to make the media a better place. And with that, I want control, a little bit of say over what you're doing. And I'm doing it because this is how we, as people, work together and change society. And that, I think, is hugely important, is we need to come up with a way, all of us together, start talking about this to our readers, and not just say, hey, we need money, Real Media needs money, Canary needs money. It's that all elements of our society, especially including the media, but not only the media, need us to start looking at things not in an individualistic way, but in a societal way where we start saying, do you know what? Society isn't dead. We're going to come together, we're going to build institutions, we're going to build our own houses, we're going to build our own energy, we're going to build our own media. And I think we start with the media because it helps every other section. As someone who's a long-term activist in all of those other areas, I realised if we don't have control and ownership over the information that we're sharing with society, then society cannot make informed decisions. It cannot support all these other projects. So I think if you're in an energy project, a housing project, if you're in political campaigns, if you're in a trade union, you need to support new media, because no one else is going to tell your story. No one else is going to give it the support that it needs. So this is something I think is really important to communicate, and it's what I hope people in this room will communicate with others. I hope when we produce these videos, you will share them with people and you'll say, yes, guys, we need to take control of our media, we need to own it, we need to run it, we need to support something new, and this is the way that we're going to build a new and better world. Because I think if anything, if we've learned anything from the Brexit debate, is that the media is not capable of informing useful public debate. It's rational public debate at all. And yet I'm a Democrat, and I hope most people in this room are Democrats, you know, who believe in people making decisions in society. Well, how are we going to do that when we don't trust the sources we get, and for good reason? When we don't trust experts, and for good reason? We need to build a new and better media. I'll finish on that. Thank you. Cheers.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth, and I want to talk to you about the Media Fund. I think that what Tom just said, and what everyone said actually, leads really nicely into this idea of, okay, so what do we do? And I think that there are many problems with the media. The main problem, maybe not the main problem, but the most upfront problem, the most immediate problem is funding. What all of the people on the panel have said so far, I think, has pretty much told you why that is, and has explained that quite well. And I think that crowdfunding, clearly, as you've seen with the examples that we've spoken about this evening, can be really effective. And not only effective in raising money in itself, but also effective in giving people who are giving to those crowdfunds an idea that they are owning their media and they're having an influence over the media that succeeds. So a few of us have, in the last month or so, got together, a bunch of media organisations and individuals have got together, and we've set up the Media Fund. That is going to be an initial crowdfund that we are raising £10,000 for to set up the fund itself. And then after that, we will ongoing, hang on, let me get my sentence out. We will fund media organisations ongoing. So it'll be a sort of ongoing crowdfund that just runs permanently. So let me get my head around my own fund. So there's the crowd fund initially, and then there's the media fund that will go on after that. So I have worked actually with all of the organisations here, and one thing that I can tell you, which probably won't surprise you, is that pretty much everyone who works in new and independent media has another job as well, and possibly several other jobs. At one point I had 5 part-time jobs, one of which was working at the Canary. I also work with the cable, and I have written for Navarra before, and pretty much all of my colleagues in all of those organisations also all have other jobs, and they're all earning bits of money here and there. No one's, pretty much no one's actual funding stream, you know, their rent payments come from journalism because it is so poorly funded, and it takes such a huge amount of time. So the kind of ratio of pay to time is really, really lacking. The Canary has come up with possibly one of the most successful responses to that, and their funding model is a really, really interesting one to look at. And Kerry actually wrote an article this week about the first birthday of the Canary, which lays that out really nicely. So if anybody doesn't know how the Canary is funded, that's a really good place to go. Remind me of the name of the article? I think it's called The Canary is One Today or something, yeah, like that. But it'll be high on the list of Canary articles if you want to go and check that out. So what we want to do with the Media Fund, there's a whole bunch of organisations. I won't tell you the entire list, mainly because I can't remember, but also because not all of them are official yet. But basically what we want to do is do this £10,000 crowdfund. If you would like to view it, it will be at crowdfunder.co.uk, and we'll be pushing it in a couple of weeks. So please look out for that and consider giving to the fund. And then once we've got that £10,000 to set up the fund, we will have basically just a website that you can visit, and you can see all of the organisations, all of their work, and give money as much as you want or as little as you want. The minimum amount is £1 a month, and you can choose where that money goes. So you could say, I want to give you £10 a month, and I want £2 of that to go to this one, I want £4 of that to go to the other one, etc. The £10,000, that I hope you will be giving us will be going towards legal costs, the registration of a cooperative, so the media fund itself will be a cooperative, and that obviously costs money to set up and register with the Financial Services Authority, Financial Conduct Authority, and paying an accountant to do our fees. We will be employing one employee just to maintain the site for a year. So giving them a part-time wage, and luckily they'll be living outside of London, so that part-time wage is considerably less than it would be if they were in the capital, and various other costs like promotion, hosting the website, things like that. So for a breakdown of all of those costs and what that £10,000 will be going to, you can look at the crowdfund when it's live, and I hope that basically, the main thing to take away from this is that even if you can't give money to the media fund, it's something that we want people to talk about and to share widely, because it's much more important that loads of people know the media fund exists than everybody gives us £1, you know. A lot of people aren't going to be able to spare money to give to a new media industry. That's just the way it is. And those are people that we want new media to represent. So as long as people know about it and they are talking about it and they're excited about it, that's really, really meaningful, more so than people parting with money that they can't afford to part with out of sort of obligation. So please do spread the word. When the crowdfunder is live, it will be crowdfunder.co.uk/media fund. You'll be able to find us on social media and everything as well. So basically just keep your eyes out and keep your eyes out on all of these platforms, because we'll obviously share it around all of our partner organisations and all of our media friends, our team. So yeah, thank you very much for coming this evening, and obviously we can talk much more about the fund and the future of new media. But basically the future of new media is, it looks pretty unknown, which is frightening and exciting, and the future of the media will be made by us.
Now's the time to make some contributions and ask some specific questions. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. I know that we have a friend, a comrade in here from the NUJ, from the New Media Council. I'd love to hear from them, and basically everyone. So, stick your hands up and we'll take 3 at a time.
Oh, crikey, right. My name's Tony Gosling. I'm a freelance radio, I suppose, investigative reporter. You'll hear me on the radio here in Bristol on BCFM between 5 and 7 every Friday, pretty much, hopefully. I just wanted to say something about my introduction to journalism was pretty harsh, I suppose. I was doing reporting for the BBC in London in the early 1990s on the IRA bombing campaign, amongst other things. Then a bit later, on the BBC programme on the 7/7 London bombings, the conspiracy files. And I mean, I came across, I suppose you could only call bullying, really, first of all through losing my job at the BBC after we were inquiring into child sexual abuse in 1993, it was, in Salisbury. And then more recently, I suppose it was before it was fashionable to be bullied over supposedly being anti-Semitic as well. But my real question is about passing on expertise from the previous generations, because one of the things that I love to do is watch old documentaries just to be inspired as to the way things can be. Things like the series like World in Action, First Tuesday, that were made by the independent people like HTV, Central Television, Roger Cook's programme that he used to do in the 1990s. The Cook Report. I mean, he was pulling in, doing really radical stuff. The bad guys, getting the bad guys. Something like 10 million viewers a week on the Roger Cook, on the Cook Report, and doing really radical stuff. So I was quite excited to find out that he lived around here. You know, we've also got Tim Tate lives in this area as well. He's a Yorkshire Television TV producer. They had massive budgets in those days, but they do have the sort of expertise that potentially we could be using to do those investigations, which are so difficult, particularly things like legal advice, that kind of thing. I'm also, I suppose, partly representing the National Union of Journalists. We do have things like temporary membership and associate membership for people who aren't earning most of their living from journalism. So do consider that, people, that I think the fees, Simon will probably tell me if I'm wrong, but it's around about £5 a month, something like that for those memberships. But it's well worth it to get involved with other journalists in the area and network. So my real question, I suppose, is how do we pass on the skills from a previous generation of really cutting-edge, internationally cutting-edge investigative journalism that's now kind of finished?
Okay, hi, my name's Nima. I've just got two quick questions. The first one would be, I think it was in relation to something Tom was saying. If you're involved in a group or a campaign or a project or there's an event happening and you would like to let some real journalists know, some grassroots journalists, how would you go about letting you know so that you could cover the story? And secondly, if I came here tonight because I'm really, I've loved seeing on the internet the new forms of media that have come out. It's really refreshing to hear, I think, people being able to express themselves independently. It's something I'd really like to get involved in. I don't currently have maybe the technical skills needed. So I was wondering, what ways are there in which people who are new can get involved? That's it, thank you.
Hello. I write articles as an individual, which tend to have a left-wing slant, but also representing organisations that are apolitical. So I'm thinking, how do we make it clear that how to make sure that these things are published in what might be considered a liberal left publication, when actually most of what I do as an individual or representing these organisations is just about making the state fit in with the Equality Act and human rights. So how do we square that circle of explaining that these aren't just for left-wingers, they're for everybody? So I'm thinking, for example, the Time to Change campaign about mental health, anti-discrimination and stigma, and getting across the point that discrimination is always wrong, whatever your political views.
I think we'll just go down. We'll start off with Kerry-Anne, and we'll let people get back to each question as they come.
I'm going to stand up just so I can warm up. Do this. Yes, on the first question around sharing skills, but also on the NUJ, I'm a member of the National Union of Journalists. I attended a branch meeting, in fact, short while ago with Simon. And we actually encourage all the contributors and the editorial team of the Canary to join the National Union of Journalists, and also to get their press card too, so that they get the rights and protections in accordance with that. While I might think, I'm a really fair employer, and our team is progressive and equality exists, I think we also need to be held to account, and I'm absolutely willing to do that as one of the shared owners of the business, is actually to say to our writers, you should collectivise, you should stand together. And we voted on our pay deal. We'll be voting on another pay deal in the new year. As our income increases, we're able to get more creative with the way that we pay people, and we will put those proposals to the workforce and have them vote on it. So I think that's a point we didn't touch on, I don't think any of us very much, but I think it is really, really important to make sure that your workplace behaves that way and that you're held to account, because as fair as you ever think you're being, you can't live the experience of your employees. And it's really important to have that connection with them so that you know where you can do better, and then do better when you find out. In terms of sharing skills, I mean, the cable's led on that. I'm not going to steal their thunder by talking about it, but they're doing brilliant stuff in terms of training new young journalists, really, really good stuff. We're planning a whole bunch of workshops in the new year with the Canary too, to, again, have those skills. And also something that we also tell people, there's two misconceptions, I think, often happen about the Canary in particular, and I guess you guys probably get it too, is because the organisations are young, they assume the people behind them are too. We're really not. Over the course of the year, we've had, people contributing for us, from, I think our youngest contributor was 16 or 17, and our oldest was in their 60s. So the contributors are across a wide age span. And in fact, the majority of our readership are between 25 and 65. We actually need to get better at reaching 18 to 24-year-olds. So yeah, there's absolutely a place to learn from the people that came before you and showed you respect. I think it's very easy when we get caught up in, we do need to challenge the way that the traditional media works, but there's also a need to acknowledge people who have worked in that industry for a very long time and done very good work, and they should be celebrated, and we should be learning from them too. What was the other question?
How do we explain things like human rights and the equality sector, not just for left-wingers? How do we reach out beyond just left-wingers?
Well, we've managed to achieve that in the last year. I mean, we're certainly well outside of the echo chamber in terms of our reach now, and the way we did that, and other people might not want to do it, but the way we want to do it was we lowered our reading level. So we actually consciously, when we set out, said we're going to have a reading age of 8 to 12. An 8-year-old child should be able to understand what we put in this article. And we get loads of stick for that. And that's fine. They can keep giving us a stick, because for me, the whole point of this is actually democracy. It's reaching the underserved, underread, undereducated people in this country who are actually have very passionate and very erudite and articulate views on the way that the country should be going. They have views on economics, they have views on politics, and they're not engaged. In fact, the only people that are speaking to them are the Sun, the Express, the Daily Star. And so we deliberately set out to actually have headlines that anyone could understand. They can understand what the story was about and why they should care about it. And then, without simplifying the ideas, simplifying the language that we use to describe that within the article itself, which means, he's now 11, an 11-year-old godson, he reads The Canary. I've got friends who are PhD students, they read The Canary. So you can get, I think it's actually one of the problems that we identified with new media. It was actually a problem with my blog when I was writing Script Tonight Daily, was it got so academic. And I think often we have a tendency as writers to actually seek the praise of other writers more than actually making sure there's a sort of thing almost you go, it's a badge of honour that only 10 people read the article and only 5 people understood it. And I don't think that's anything to crow about. I think you should be writing for the people, I think we got insulted once. Someone said, The Canary, the #1 news source for Barry down the pub. And I was ecstatic, because that's exactly what we wanted to do, because currently Barry down the pub is reading the Daily Star, and I'd really like him to stop paying his money to the Daily Star and, have some alternative views. And then you do earn the right to have those kind of conversations. I think our most popular article in the last year was on the Snoopers Charter. Our third most popular article was on the privatisation of the land registry. These are not video viral articles, but they went absolutely viral because people could have that access. So, yes, those would be... And your question?
What's the relationship between, say, the new media and the communities that have stories?
Brilliant. I'll answer that very quickly. Sorry, and I'm monopolising the microphone a bit. With us, people email us. So actually, the majority of our original journalism this year has been reader-generated stories. We get emails, we get text messages, we get messages on the Facebook page saying, this is happening. This is happening. In fact, we were the first UK media outlet to get hold of whistleblowers that were tied to the election expenses fraud scandal. They actually came to us. They were Canary readers. And they emailed us and said, we'd actually really like to talk to you. We think something very, very wrong took place over this period of time. And we were able to work with them, have their stories, publish our own stories. But we actually gave the story to Channel 4 News, because Channel 4 News were in a position that they could provide legal cover for the whistleblowers, and we weren't. So we were actually willing to give up a portion of the sort of the praise, the accolade associated with that exclusive to make sure that fundamentally those whistleblowers were protected. So yeah, if you've got stories and you're sitting here now and there's something happening in your community, email Novara, email us, email the cable, because we'll be only too happy to get involved and cover it.
Yeah, I was just going to come back quickly on Nima's 2 questions. So I think you also mentioned how campaigns can let outlets know about stories as well. So, I mean, one useful tip that I always give to campaign groups, having been in many of them, is to look up how to write a decent press release, because you end up receiving quite a lot of these things, and it doesn't take sort of that much crafting to make it appealing to an editor who will want to follow it up and actually get in touch with the contacts provided on it. A second way, and feeding into the second question about what ways are there to get involved if you're new. In the case of, say, Navarra, pitches an idea. There are full pitching instructions on our website, and we're very clear that you don't have to be, a long-in-the-tooth writer in order to write. As we see it, for a start, we always respond to every email, and that's not common practice for a lot of outlets. As we see it, the role of the editor is to help that article be the best it can be. So even if it comes to us and it's not maybe particularly well written because it's not written by someone who's usually a writer, but that's fine. If there's an interesting idea in there, we're going to work together to bring it out and to publish it. So we personally think that's really important. And the second way to get involved in something like a media project, if you're an editor, is to find ways that you can do it in a relatively sort of risk-free environment. The first time I got involved with editing was through a student newspaper, and that was a really useful experience. And then after that, it was like political magazines, and went on. And you can never get a completely risk-free environment, but sometimes the best way to make mistakes is to make them really publicly. Which I'm sure we've all done at some point. So that's the best way. So there's never going to be a completely sort of risk-free way of getting involved with editing, but things like local independent presses, or things like if you're a student, for example, then university things, or if you're in a workplace, think about free sheets. So I'm also a workplace organizer, and I always try to make sure that if we're running a campaign, then we're also running a free sheet that just gives people the basic things they need to know, or the things we think are important, and then someone's got to put that together, and that's editing. That's a good way to get involved, and then you can maybe move up to other outlets over time.
So I don't want to repeat too much of what Craig just said, because our model is pretty similar in terms of if you've got a story, pitch us, or if you want us to come and cover something, send us an email. Likewise, we always try and respond to stuff, and we try and our editors try and work with people to, a lot of people who do stuff for us have never done anything before either. For the other question, the passing on the skills, that's something that we think is absolutely vital, and this is kind of a good opportunity to plug the upcoming thing that's happening with the cable, which is sadly one of our early members and people who used to do design work for us died, and their family gave us a donation, which it's a £3,000 donation. We've used that to completely fund a series of 12 workshops for 11 people, completely free, and that's and that's with people from like the Centre for Community Journalism, which is based at Cardiff Uni, Centre for Investigative Journalism. We've got some Guardian journalists. We've got a guy who writes for Huck magazine, which is a UK and US based thing, and it's like a really, really good program, and we're delivering that totally for free. So we think that passing on skills from people who have come before is absolutely vital. For getting stories into the mainstream, it's really hard, but I think one thing that we've tried to get better at recently is basically just being a bit shameless and kind of like going to them and saying, hey, look, this is really, really, really good, and you need to be covering this. that's something that's taken us a long time to get to. But I think it's, you know, like Craig says, it's if you do something, if you write something, put it online, and it, you know, something gets criticised in it, then it makes you not do that next time. It makes you do it better, and it makes you sort of, you know, your skills improve, and then a year down the line, you're writing stuff which is going to get more attention.
Thank you. We're going to stop doing the clapping, right? We're not Americans, are we? By the way, I'm taking notes on my phone. I'm not texting because I'm bored. I'm actually quite inspired. It's hard to tell from my monotone northern accent. How do we pass on skills from previous generations? It's a really good question, because actually real media is quite young in some respects in who contributes to us and stuff like that. And we found that we don't actually have much access to people because we're a new media outlet to previous generations' worth of skills. I joined a local filmmaking group, and they actually had a workshop by an investigative journalist who worked for the Times, and he'd broken fantastic stories. He'd found out that in the 1970s, and this is rarely talked about, that members of the Conservative Party and the royal family had planned a coup. They were going to use the QE2 and bring it down the Thames. You can check this out. It's a documentary. BBC did a full-length documentary. Times journalist, properly checked. Members of the royal family and everything. He was the one who discovered Israel had nuclear weapons. He also was the one who revealed that the Americans bombed an Israeli ship. But it's a very interesting story about the coup. You should definitely check it out. I should try and remember his name. It's terrible that I don't. He's done some fantastic work. Now, that was entirely new to me, and it was, the study of investigative journalism, as we're finding at the moment. Cam, who's the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Real Media, is a constant inspiration to me, is about to start releasing stories in conjunction with BuzzFeed on potentially the biggest banking fraud in British history. We've got whistleblowers from inside who've worked inside the big banking institutions for decades, some of them. Right? And this work is brilliant, but she started this work around about 14 months ago. She's a properly trained journalist. She went to school and stuff to do specifically that. I didn't, and I'm gobsmacked. And she's just stuck with it. She calls up experts and goes, right, I don't understand this. Explain this to me. Explain it again. Explain it to me so that I can explain it to someone else. So when this stuff comes out, please check it out. And she's done it because she's got training. Sorry, that's slightly off topic, but I'm just really excited about it. How do you let real journalists know about what you're doing? Well, we're running a workshop tomorrow evening, and specifically on that, and there's a lot of hints and tips that I usually give, except I'm going to Nottingham, but hopefully Jamie will say this, learn how to write press releases well. If you're trying to get in stuff as a campaigns organisation, it's worth being able to say, look, we've got an audience for this. We'll get you clicks. We'll get our 2,000 members, our 200 members to do this. We've got some weight, so it'll be worth it for you guys to go into it. Try and make it topical. Try and actually say, okay, there's going to be a bill going through Parliament or a decision being made or something like that is coming up. We're going to plan ahead. We're going to plan an action, and we're going to let the organisation know a week or so ahead of time so that they can cover it and prepare to cover it well so that it can give it the push it needs. And that comes down to, obviously, as a campaigning organisation, having a strategy, generally having a strategy. Your media strategy is about your strategy. And there's people get strategy and tactics confused. Tactics are what you do in the immediate. Tactics comes from to touch. But strategy is your long-term strategy. What are you trying to achieve? Talk about that. And so if you want to get a lot of coverage, plan a series of actions, not just one action. Plan one a week for 12 weeks or one a day for 7 days, something like that. If it's not topical, then make it topical. That's something that as a campaign organisation is worth looking into. You can always get in touch with us we're keen on helping writers as well. I think everyone here is. So a good way is to do it new media. In fact, actually one story on that is that I was trying to learn to be a writer, and Cam, who's the editor, took me on because I'd heard this story that said, basically, if you want to be a fiction writer, then write a short story a week, every week for a year, because no one can write 52 bad short stories. I think I think I disproved that with my first year's work at Real Fair at the time. But that's what I did. I wrote an article a week, and it was publicly criticised, and I found my voice because I used to try and do stuff that was quite rowdy and based on the terraces, and I used language that was, obscene at certain points, but certainly quite, was not actually the audience that we were looking at was not what would engage them. And it was like the quality of your story is interesting, but this is not the way, that I want to discuss this topic. You'll learn by just making mistakes, learn by doing. And very finally, what was it? It's the big question. How do we get people, say this isn't for left-wingers? I think that's a hugely important point. The Sun hires exceptionally well-qualified people, very smart people, and what do? They only write 30 words a sentence. They aim at specific. They know that there's a specific reading age. So and that's an indictment of our school system. But it's also a reality we've got to work with. But there are other things, and this is what we want to do. We want to encourage you to. We're launching an app, and the app puts the best of the independent media in one place. All the different organisations you'll be able to view through this one app, through this one website. That's what we're launching 10th of December at the Media Democracy Festival. Right? That's the reason for a lot of these talks, is to build up interest about it. What we want you to be able to do is go to people and say, hey, you don't have to follow 40 or 50 different sites. You don't have to be an academic or fully involved in politics. There's this one thing, and it will give you 1 or 2 updates every day, a little notification on your phone saying, here's a story you haven't heard about, here's some news you haven't heard about, but you should hear about it. And do you know what? Bit by bit, I feel that we will encourage people to look for something different from their news. So look out for the Real Media app coming 10th of December at the Media Democracy Festival. That's when we launch it, along with the Media Fund.
Yeah, I was just going to make the same point that Thomas just made, actually, in response to your question, Nima, is that if you have a story and you think this would be particularly good for a podcast, for like an investigative journalist podcast, or I think this would be a perfect story for the Canary, or you're in Bristol and I think this would be a perfect story for the Cable, you can go to the Media Fund site, which will work in tandem with the Real Media app. And you can look at this kind of compendium of, I don't know, is that the right word, compendium? This like list, better word, reading age debate, this list of basically like media organisations. So it'll be kind of like a catalogue essentially, like you can go to this one place and go, okay, here's all the organisations. So it will just depend on what you're looking for. So, am I looking for a local magazine in Manchester, or am I looking for, something that is international? Am I looking for media diversified, or am I looking for Navarra? That kind of thing. So we're hoping that it's not going to just the Media Fund specifically, won't just fund the media, but it also will give people much more access to other organisations that they don't already know about, and a wider range of new and independent media that is like the stuff that they already like but don't know about. So hopefully that will make things easier in terms of access as well.
Okay, now you can clap. Let's take a couple more contributions, and then we'll wrap it up and let you find somewhere slightly warmer.
Hi there, my name's Andy Mitchell. I'm a member of Unite Community, and we've been sent here today, Zaria and myself, to come and listen to what you have to say. We have stories aplenty, and we're looking to build relationships. We're part of Unite the Union, but one of the major frustrations that we have is finding places to actually share what we're doing, because we thought we would have a natural relationship with, what's the paper that you read? The Morning Star, but it hasn't seemed to happen. So we're looking for opportunities to build relationships, also training relationships, because we have a lot of budding writers who are doing blogs, they're using Facebook, they're using Twitter at the moment, but they haven't sort of stepped up to that next height. So it's not really such a question. It's just, would you be prepared to sort of work with us on to build a closer relationship? All right, that's great.
I think it's great that you're in Bristol. I think it's great that you're doing a tour. I think it's great we're all here. What I'd really like to see happen is that people that vote UKIP, BNP, Brexit, get a chance to tune in to alternative media. And I'm wondering if you've got a strategy to reach those people.
Hi, I'm Jenny, and I have had some involvement with local media in Bristol in the years really before social media took off. So I'm interested in, with writers as they progress, when they're, like you're saying, contributors to any kind of media. Maybe they come across a story and it turns out a bit bigger than it first seemed, and it becomes investigative journalism. Now, the editor looks at this story, and you're talking about risk and things like this, but how geared up is new media to really being able to run with a really big story and not feel they have to hand it over to a bigger party in case they risk kind of legal action that will close the whole organisation down? How do you grow your writers to be able to not just be published and do articles, but be able to really follow something through to become, writers who can sort of follow something? Because local writers are really, they should be in a position where they can really develop a story and get deep down with it in a way that maybe the national or London-centric press won't be able to do so. But how do you think, have the new media got the cover and the resources to be able to run with these big breaking stories and maybe cut through this 24-hour media, which just seems to be repeating the same sound bites, but they don't actually develop the stories across the day? You're hearing the same dong bits and pieces in the evening news that you are at breakfast news. And recently they've been saying that the midnight shift, the early morning shift, isn't fact-checked properly. So the mistakes that go through the day are due to that no one wants to work that shift in the media. And these things, it's all very managed, isn't it? But how do you develop the deep, the good writers and the stories, and is the new media able to really break those stories without threat of being closed down?
I just wanted to come back to that last question straight away, because it gives me another opportunity to plug the fund. Basically, one of the things that we want to do is set up different pots of funding. One of those things is going to be legal advice. That is something that absolutely a lot of new media can't do at the moment. They can't cover themselves. Now, obviously, as much as the next journalist, any journalists or filmmakers or whatever working in new media are told to fact check, and they're all, very rigorous. All of the journalists and writers that I know are all incredibly conscientious people, and they all, would do everything above board. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to, piss people off and get people coming down heavy on them. So they still, even if they're doing really good work and clean work, then they still need protection. And so, for example, the Bristol Cable, we're really lucky to have Mike Jempson on our board, who is a member of MediaWise, and he's very, very knowledgeable about things like this. But we also, I think that we've also sought legal advice in the past, not because we were getting sued or anything like that, but just because it was, something to do with a contract or something like that. But that was a one-off thing, and that was a struggle to finance. So, these things are things that I think journalists are aware of, and editors and managers are aware of, and they can, here and there, they kind of will seek advice. But I don't think I know any new media organisation that's got its own lawyer, let alone a whole department of people who are kind of looking out for them in that way. So, a lot of it, and as you say, developing writers to do big stories, I mean, you know, that thing that someone was talking about with Cam from Real Media, she's been working for more than a year on this one story. So it's time and money. And we need to, as a collective, provide that. And I'm hoping that we can do that.
Yeah, do we have to hand it over to others? Do we have the capacity and the resources to develop our own stories and protect them, look after it? The short answer is currently no. The new media doesn't. You know, we're developing certain things with Real Media that puts our whistleblowers, you know, protects them and so forth like that. But we don't have a legal department. So yeah, currently we don't have those resources. I mean, currently the new media, the state of the new media in Britain is about a decade behind the state of the new media in America. It's for two key reasons. One is America has a larger domestic market. So the Young Turks, if you've ever heard of them online, I watch them for election debate stuff, they have 60 full-time employed staff, right? You know, and they've only got 10,000 supporters, 10,000 paying supporters. But, you know, you can get 10,000. And the second reason is because Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn at MIT, which is in Boston, founded something called ZNet a long time ago to support independent media. And what grew up, you know, there was indie media was the thing that we all used as activists at the time, but clearly that model didn't work for a number of reasons and fell to pieces. But ZNet, which had helped develop indie media, was already looking to the next thing and helped found Democracy Now!, the Real News Network, like huge organisations that are now actually Real Media and Common Space in Scotland are two members of the ZNet Global Independent Media Forum, but they're way ahead of us. And what we've got to do is learn from what they've done, but we can actually improve on it. What they haven't done is centralise and create a platform that provides funding for everyone. And they haven't created a platform which puts all of their independent media outlets in one place. And I'm hoping that we can come up with more collaborative and innovative solutions so that actually, even though we're not ready now, within 12 to 24 months, not only will we be ready, but we'll be better than the American or global independent media. That's what I'm hoping. And that will depend on people in this room. Unite Community Union, I used to be in Unite Community Union. There's two key problems for you as I see it. One is the quantity of stories. Quite frankly, I used to come out in tears from the meetings, especially at the beginning of the cuts in Greater Manchester. When we founded the Community Union, the stories are, it's heartbreaking. It's really hard. But I imagine you've got a lot of members, you've got a lot of stories about very human, real things that people would want to hear about. But independent media, as I've just mentioned, doesn't have the resources to tell all of those stories currently. Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, and it done fantastic work. Unite Community Union, big it up. It's massive. It's huge. You've got to help it, support it. The other problem is format. You know, how do we tell those stories? We haven't worked out a great way to tell those human stories yet in a consistent manner. Again, that's something that actually at Real Media we're working on, and we'd like to develop an entire channel of the website devoted to telling these stories, and we'd like to deliver training in those areas. But that's going to be at least a 12, 18-month project before we can, but we'd like to work closely with you on that. Finally, UKIP. There's a three-stage strategy to what we're doing with Real Media, because what we're trying to do is promote the rest of the independent media, as well as producing our own content. So the first off is to build this app to get, you know, the usual suspects in rooms and tell them that it exists and start getting people on that. Secondarily, in conjunction with the Media Fund, use funding to deliver media training workshops and other talks around the country in marginal constituencies and in right-wing constituencies. You know, look at the electoral map, look at demographics, and go to those places and start doing it there. And then thirdly, you know, in about 3 years' time, sort of prior to the elections, though we're not an electoral and we're not particularly interested, but it just happens to be that way, really focus on marginal constituencies specifically, because we find that you get the greatest cross-section of people in those areas. I grew up in one, and it's got a mixture of people from mining towns in the inner city and fox hunters and rugger buggers, and it's a real interesting mix. So we wanted to focus demographically on those areas and try and... But before that, we want to have something worthwhile taking to them. So it's up to you guys to help us give us feedback on what we're doing, so we make sure that what we're taking to those areas is something that they'll be interested in, is something worthwhile.
So first question, short answer, yes, I will give you my email address. Second question, Brexit UKIP voters. It's a really, really key question. It's something we're constantly trying to figure out at the Cable. One of the things that we've done that has gone quite well in that is we've, and this is where the print comes in for us, because we distribute the print to 30,000, we print 30,000 copies and we distribute to 600 places across the city, as well as the sort of the usual places like, cafes and all the rest of it. We also take it to, chip shops and barbers and pubs and working men's clubs and all the rest of that kind of stuff as well. So, and our distribution network covers pretty much the entire city, all the way out to Avonmouth, down into Hartcliffe, all the way up into the north of the city as well. So we try and cover as much of the city as we can to get what we are saying out there. The second stuff is content which kind of has appeal across audiences. So we did something back in the build-up to the mayoral elections in Bristol, where we produced a series of short documentaries which were about 8 minutes long each, about the different mayoral candidates. And we spoke to, I think, there were so many candidates, there were like 15, so we couldn't speak to them all, but we spoke to, I think, 8 or 9 of them, including the UKIP candidate. That series of videos, I think, ended up being watched by about 25,000 people or something like that. So it got a lot of attention, and it got some attention in the other press in the city as well. So it kind of amplified that out. And that's something we've tried to do with a lot of our stories. But we've realised that our reach is kind of limited at the moment. So we've tried to make our story big enough that someone else notices it and then, reports it on our behalf, so it kind of then goes an extra stage. The third thing about the resources and the legal advice, it's a real problem. I mean, the Cable has been threatened to be sued twice, I think, by George Ferguson. It's never gone anywhere, but he's threatened to sue us, and if he sort of went through with it, the sheer fact of legal fees would be a massive problem for us to actually, pay for. No, I think he'll probably figure it out. But yeah, so I mean, like, the only thing I can really say about that is we've been really lucky in that we've got a really good network of people who give us advice for free. And I would say with that, just you'd be surprised what you can get if you just ask. Like, the Cable started literally by just going up to people and saying, hey, we're doing this thing, do you think it's a good idea? And so many people have just given us free legal advice, or they've proofread something and gone, no, you can't say that, you've got to change it to say this. It's been a learning curve, but it's something that we've, and it's something that constantly fret about. So there's 2 articles in that which are, in really in-depth investigations, and the people who wrote them before they got published were like, bricking it, because they were just like, oh God, have I completely got this nailed down? But yeah, like, and in relation to the idea of the fund which is, set up to sort of do this kind of stuff, that's vital in the long run, because ultimately, if someone decides they want to take you down, then even if they're wrong, and it's the sheer fact of them taking you to court for that case to be then thrown out, that's still going to cost you quite a lot of money to deal with that. So, it's important that we get that sorted.
Unite community. So, we'd be interested. The one limitation, I think, for us, and maybe for a lot of new media, is that is a sort of limited capacity to be able to carry out decent, and particularly in a timely fashion, like good reportage, because really Quite often people will say, "Oh, have you ever thought about doing reportage?" And we've always said, "Well, if ever we were going to go away from commentary and into straight reportage, then it would be in a very broad sense, like industrial reportage, and that would include sort of industrial decline and things like that, social affairs." But the thing is, we can't really compete with newspapers, even the Morning Star, because they have daily staff who are there to pick up the phone and get writing on a story, whereas commentary does have a sort of there's like a materially mediated benefit, which is that commentary takes a moment of reflection, and that works quite well for us because we've all got other jobs, and so sustained reportage of the sorts of issues that would be unearthed by working with Unite Community is definitely something that we would aspire to, but that itself would probably require dedicated people to do it, though it is part of our plan to have a whole section of the website in time that will be dedicated to reporting those issues in a timely fashion. Similarly, it's also part of our plan to expand into investigative journalism. I think you hit the nail on the head that you mentioned that resources are a big issue. If we were going to do it, we'd really want to give a story to a team and be able to pay them to go away and do a good job, and we've got a good roster of really good writers who we could approach to do that, but obviously they'd need the resources to do it. It's not really fair to ask them to do it for a sort of what's basically a tip, or next to free. The other issue is training, of course. I mean, we sort of learned this lesson fairly early on with Novara Wire. We've only had one threat of legal action, and it came from very famous... he's a very famous person. I don't know if he's very famous. He also happens to be a Conservative Party donor. I don't know if he's famous for being a Conservative Party donor. I suspect he's not. He also happens to be the lead singer of a popular boy band from the 90s with a bit of a resurgence a few years back. I don't know if I can say his name, but we'll call him Garrett Baslow from Tick This. And when that email came through from lawyers, we were like, whoa, because one other issue is that a lot of new media organisations are not they're not limited companies. They're unincorporated, which basically means that the legal liability falls on everyone in the organisation personally, which is a big problem. So I'm not sure I have much more to say on that. Strategy for reaching people who vote UKIP and Brexit and things like that. That's a really interesting one, and I was sort of sat here making a few notes and thinking about what I think about that. I think that, so in terms of Novara Media specifically, we're always mindful that we're not trying to build an empire that's just us. We are part of an ecology, and I think the ecology of independent media as a whole does have a responsibility to do that. But I'm not sure that it would be fair of me to pretend that we think Novara Media's specific role in that ecology is that. I guess part of the reason, sitting and thinking about it, is that we have a very close relationship to social movements, and social movements that campaign for, liberation from, poor working conditions, or from, gender oppression, or various other, social ills. And I guess we think that social change fundamentally happens through social movements, and that independent media has to assist those, but isn't a substitute for those. I'm personally not of the opinion that people have a sort of a passive relationship to the media. I don't think it's true that people, just passively consume the media and believe everything they're told them. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would argue against me on that, and that's a reasonable thing to do. But I do obviously acknowledge that media representations of issues as they unfold, and that will cause people perhaps to think about voting UKIP, are a part of that problem. The one issue that perhaps doesn't get considered, even if there are good intentions behind it, is the issue of reach. How do you actually reach those people? I mean, our articles reach people through social media, particularly Facebook, and it's very easy to think of social media as being this massive place because everyone's on it. I mean, even something like, less so Twitter, but Facebook is a very intergenerational thing, people's grandparents are on it and things now, it's very young people. But actually, when you can take a sort of God's eye view of how things get shared around on social media, there are very sort of discrete, echo chambers, really. I mean, if you look at, the analytics of Twitter, for example, there's an entire Twitter that would seem as if everyone thinks Donald Trump's a good thing. And there's an entire Twitter of everyone who thinks that Hillary Clinton's a good thing. I recently sort of tapped into a Twitter where, and I refer to it as another Twitter because, there were no mutual followers, mutual following people. These people weren't following the same news sources as me. They seemed entirely self-contained, and they were sort of 19-year-old, of the sort of like 18 to 24 demographic Maoists. And I can't remember how I came across this group, and I thought, this is bizarre, and I sort of looked through who people are following, where they're getting these ideas from, and they're sort of very self-contained, and I think that it's not necessarily just as easy as redirecting our content so that it's appealing to other people. The one exception is probably, particularly when it comes to Facebook, is videos. Because there was a change sometime last year. Previously, I mean, people, when Facebook makes changes, you actually probably don't even realise that they're doing them in most of the cases. But previously, if you wanted to host a video on Facebook, Facebook videos and YouTube videos would be sort of ranked the same algorithmically. So obviously, within your timeline, things appear in a certain order, and Facebook decides what that order is based on a number of metrics and factors. Recently, they made it so that Facebook videos would be ranked higher in people's timelines than YouTube videos. So when we started putting videos on Facebook, instead of linking to our YouTube, we uploaded them as a Facebook video. The trade-off is that Facebook owns that video, because everything on Facebook is owned by Facebook, even what you think is yours. It's a private space. But our video numbers just spiked massively, huge over the summer, reaching millions of people. And, because something like Facebook is a very sort of intergenerational place now, that's probably one of the ways that new media could actually tap into areas outside of their echo chamber, like on a technical basis as well, because the videos and things are feasibly able to get beyond the usual crowd.
Yes, the same answer to you guys. I can give you our email address and get in touch, and we can develop that. On UKIP, we were actually really astonished in our first kind of 2 to 3 months, noticing how many UKIP supporters were reading us, because obviously we see the likes come up on the Facebook page, and you've got UKIP banners and stuff. Like, this wasn't a deliberate ploy. I mean, it was ultimately a conversation that we wanted to do. It's part of the whole reason behind our styling, the way we use language, the way we create emotive headlines. Was all about doing exactly what Craig is talking about, which was breaking out of the echo chamber, reaching the people who aren't, already reading Open Democracy or, whoever else. And we almost saw ourselves as like a bridge, sort of between the traditional media and the new media. We could sort of bring people over that bridge with a sort of intermediary approach to storytelling, which is essentially what media is. And yes, I think what I hear from those members who are sort of joining us or even subscribing, you will never find any bigoted, racist, anti-immigrant content on our site ever. Like we publish vigorous arguments against UKIP, against that sort of scapegoating mentality that UKIP have so cynically and effectively leveraged over the last couple of years. We want to do it the other way, though. And I think that's what we are doing, is actually saying to people, really, you're right to be pissed off. Like, you're not imagining being screwed over. You actually are being fundamentally screwed over. People are being disenfranchised. You know, the rise of 0 hours contracts in this country is just a scandal. You know, the kinds of jobs that used to be full-time salaried jobs, you know, in hotels and restaurants, even, you know, shops now, everyone's on 0 hours contracts. They're waiting for a phone call on a Monday morning to find out if they've got even work that week. And of course that means that they're much more compliant and much more willing to be abused in that workplace because they want to be the person that gets the call on Monday morning to find out that they've got that work. And we've been pretty relentless in trying to change that narrative. And I think in my book I talked about the sort of the, what do you call it, analogy, metaphor of you know, you've got a banker, a migrant and a teacher sitting at a table, and on the table there's a plate full of it's got 10 biscuits on it, and while the teacher and the immigrant are busy having a conversation, the banker nicks 9 of the biscuits and shoves them in his pocket, a couple in his mouth. Then when the immigrant and the teacher turn around, he just leans over to the teacher and says, "Watch out, that immigrant's trying to steal your biscuit." You know, and I see our role as very much whispering in the other ear of that teacher, the banker's got your biscuits. Actually, there are 9 whole other biscuits that we should be having a conversation about, rather than fighting over the crumbs of this lone biscuit that has been left on the table. And that's what we've been trying to do for last year. And I think that's starting to work. I think people are starting to understand the actual economic factors and the political decisions that have them so disenfranchised and experiencing, you know, a financial and even an accommodation and heating insecurity, the likes of which we've not seen in this country for decades. So that's the UKIP question. In terms of the protection for whistleblowers, so the Canary Media is a limited company. Yeah.
And so, you know, you've got this kind of scenario where cowboys can operate. You've got people with the new smartphones and the media, and they kind of think they're as legitimate as a very trained writer in the media, because they can just, you know, take the pictures with their phone and they can try and contribute and the rest of it. But I mean, there's a massive difference between developing as a writer and you know, who is looking towards developing some operative style for media about.
Yeah, I think everyone is. I mean, we're liable to the same laws as any other publisher. You know, we don't get to just print what we like and run away. I mean, that, you know, we're a company. We're liable to being sued. But the other element of what we've done is we've got a 6-gate editorial process, which Liz has lived through. And it's painful. Yeah, and it's public in terms of the company, so that there aren't private conversations happening about stories. Everyone's pitching in the same space, and your story has to go through 6 very robust editorial checkpoints before it even gets to the point of being published. It's only able to be published by an editor. We follow the National Union of Journalists editorial guidelines. We also have our own style guide. There is a heck of a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to fact check, to quality check, to legal check those stories. We do have lawyers now. We developed that relationship after that story came out, so we are running stories past lawyers too. It's a professional outfit, and we hold ourselves to a very, very high standard. Our readers hold us to a very high standard, and the law holds us to a very high standard. So there's not really that wiggle room, and I mean, it's in our interest. You know, the reason all of us are here is because we saw people misreporting stories. We saw stories going unreported, misreported, underreported. So it's not in our interest as human beings to replicate those mistakes. But even if we did want to, you know, certainly part of everything we've thought about in terms of setting up the business of the Canary was, how do we bootstrap our morality? Like, how do we make sure everything is pointing in the right direction and all of our incentives are based on doing the right thing? So yes, lawyers are important. Being a limited company is important because paying your taxes is important. You know, we pay our taxes. We encourage, demand our writers pay their taxes. Their limited companies do. Several of them. We're now in a position where I think we're at now 9 or 10 of 20 are now full-time, that this is what their primary income is coming from the Canary. They're not working other jobs. They are doing that. They are paying their mortgages. They're paying their food bills from their writing, so they're invested in it that way. And we also own the company. So this is another thing, is that the Canary isn't owned by anyone who doesn't work for it on a daily basis. So we care about it. We really care. We care that that business persists, that we continue to be able to serve our audiences, and we would be wiped out, if we messed up and vilified the wrong person, or got into the sort of gossip, disgusting stuff that you can see in the Sun if you choose to. Well, we were 3 months old first. There was no way on earth at 3 months old. We felt we had the maturity, frankly, to take that on at that stage. We are there now. We've been working on our story for now 10 months, similar to Cam, and we've enlisted very, very heavyweight legal support behind the scenes to continue developing that story. That's something you can look forward to in the new year. Lots more work still to do. So yeah, you grow and you develop your resources, and luckily we've been in a position now to, we've got the investigative journalism fund up together. We have now a capital float, so there's actually money in the bank as capital that can protect us if we're suddenly hit by something, and that's only been possible by being really diligent and expanding our readership all of the time, expanding that support. I'm sorry, I know I've got to speed up. There was another question.
I think that was the 3, actually.
I've covered it. Thank you.
Okay, so that's actually, according to mine, almost exactly 9 o'clock. So I just want to say, at this point, thank you very much for sticking with it and asking really interesting questions. I hope it's been of some use and some interest. I'm sure most of us, I certainly will do, make myself available now if you want to just come up and have a quiet chat and catch up and discuss issues further, and we might even retire to an establishment that serves beverages. So you'll be welcome to join us for that. Thank you very much, and can you give a round of applause to our speakers who are currently going to the toilet? Thank you, guys. Cheers. Have a good one.